tonight, I am going to start doing this cool thing, at least I think it's cool, called Feedback Fridays. Honestly, we have a lot that happens in the week, and this is our day to just pause, reflect, and be intentional about the information that we receive. So before we get started though, I would love to hear from you guys. If you were to give 2020, the year 2020, some feedback right now, go ahead and type in there for me. Are you giving 2020 some positive feedback or some constructive feedback? Like, how are you guys feeling about 2020 right now? Because if you're anything like me, like this week has been heavy. The past few months have been heavy, but 2020 has been quite the year. So just to keep that in mind, if we were going to give some constructive feedback to 2020, we might be able to use some of these tips I'm going to share with you guys today. But today, what I really want to focus on was thinking about the video I posted yesterday. Not sure if you had a chance to see it, but it is really about, feedback and having a deficit mindset or an asset mindset. So let me back up a little bit for those who maybe didn't see the video yesterday. So when I talk about feedback, for me, feedback is simply information, and it really is information about our past given in our present so that we could use it to inform how we could really get to the future that we want. And so feedback is valuable. I go so far as to say that feedback is a gift. Some people would probably beg to differ, but feedback really is a gift. But in order to really utilize that gift to its full potential, you have to be willing to think about your mindset. And you got to have the right mindset when it comes to feedback. So that's where we talked about asset mindset versus a deficit mindset. And that is the key to developing a really strong feedback mentality. So what I want you to do, and I did this in the video yesterday, but I'm going to do it again, because I want you to really think about this. So when I say to you this phrase, I want you to really think about, and I want you to type in the chat for me, what feelings, what emotions come to mind when I lean in and I say to you, hey, can I give you some feedback? Like, with that tone, I want you to tell me what chimes for you. Go ahead and type in the chat there for me and let me know when you lean in, when someone leans in and says they have feedback for you, like what emotions come to mind? For some people feel optimistic, excited, some not so much. When we receive that little cue that we're going to be getting some constructive feedback, some people really start to spiral a little bit. And really that's where the crux of the asset mindset, deficit mindset comes into play, because sometimes we start to spiral before we even get the feedback. I mean, has that ever happened to you? Like, have you ever heard that someone's going to give you feedback, or you're planning for a meeting with someone and you're like, oh, they're going to give me some feedback? Have you ever just spun out and you hadn't even received the feedback yet? Oftentimes that's because we're in a deficit mindset where we're thinking about, oh no, they're going to tell me, they're going to figure out that I'm an imposter and I don't know what I'm doing. Oh, I probably didn't do this right. Oh, I'm not good enough. Oh, I'm not worthy. I'm not capable. I'm not valuable enough. And sometimes we sit in those thoughts, right? And I'll be honest, I have them. I have to work intentionally through those thoughts each and every day, because depending on who I'm interacting with and what task I'm working on, those thoughts kind of bubble up. So I don't know about you. Have you ever done that? I've seen people, I've done it. I know people who, before they even gotten the feedback, were already wound up. And that's a natural process that happens because your brain is always scanning its environment, trying to figure out, hey, is this information or is this person going to help me or hurt me? And the moment that your brain signals that this may not be good, guess what? It goes into protective mode. It goes into that flight or fight, and it tries to protect you. So for some of us, when we go into fight mode, sometimes it looks like verbal judo, where we are saying all sorts of things to try to protect ourselves. And in some cases, it goes into silence, and some people come really introverted, reflective, and withdrawn. And so for me, that's why I wanted tonight to just reflect on asset versus deficit mindset, because we could do a few things to switch that thinking. It's not automatic. It's not as easy said as done, but if you were to work intentionally at it, I believe you'd be able to see some progress. So let's talk a little bit about it. So if you were someone who said, you know what, oftentimes when I'm approached with getting constructive feedback, I do start to worry a little bit. I do get a little nervous. I am a little maybe unsure, insecure. How do I change that? How do I flip the narrative on that? So the first thing I want to highlight for you is just remember what I said, that feedback is just information, okay? So feedback is information, and it's what you do with the information that gives it power. Right? I mean, think about that. What you do with the information is what gives it power. Feedback is not powerful until you actually act upon it. So, what are you making meaning out of the feedback? You have to claim your power back, because sometimes when we hear feedback, we feel like they made us feel this way. Right? I've done it. My husband, I asked him to come in here and do the live with me. He was like, nah. Because he knows, like, we'll have a different point of view, and it's easy to go feel like, oh, that person made me feel that way. And that's a powerless position to be in. You want to be in a powerful position. You want to reclaim your agency, right? You want to be in control of your life and not feel as though you have to play victim to somebody's comment about you, right? So that's the first tip. I want you to remember that feedback is simply just information. It's your thought about that information that gives it power. So we're going to pause there for a moment because I want you to think about this. What are your thoughts about feedback? It's important that you pause and examine that, because I think the moment you unpack the narrative that you've attached to what someone else has said to you, you start to really understand a little bit more about yourself. I think that's why I love feedback so much, because it's not so much about the other people, which we'll talk about other people in another live, because I'll tell you, everybody is not equipped to give feedback. But at the end of the day, it's really not even about them. It's about you. It's about me. It's about how I'm internalizing the information that people share with me, right? So keep in mind that it's information. And the second you start to feel a little bit of insecurity, a little bit of doubt, you want to pause there and go, let me check the source. So where is this coming from? And that's what I like to do. I like to ask myself questions. So you go from information to now investigation. You want to investigate why you feel that way, especially if you haven't even received the feedback yet. You're just preparing to go into a meeting, or you're anticipating someone wanting to give you feedback. So I like to investigate. I like to ask questions like, where did this come from? Why am I feeling this way? If you can understand first and foremost, what are you feeling? So being able to name it, can you name and actually say aloud, I'm nervous, I'm upset, I'm frustrated, or I'm, whatever the word is for you. Some people don't even have the emotional literacy and the vocabulary to name how they're feeling. So that's the first thing you have to do, is just say, hey, if I feel like I'm in a deficit mindset, let me name what the thought is and how I'm feeling. The next thing you need to do, though, is to connect that feeling to a source, because that emotion didn't just come out of nowhere, right? I like to tell my husband, I'm not crazy. I didn't imagine this. I didn't start to feel this way out of nowhere. It is indeed connected to something, but not necessarily the information that was shared. If you were to really dig deep and try to find the source of the frustration, you might find that it's actually rooted in other things. So when you start to uncover for yourself, hey, why am I feeling this way? Why is this feedback got me all riled up? You might find that they actually touched a trigger within yourself that is really presenting this physical manifestation of your feelings, right? Because, your blood pressure gets high, your palms sweat, you can feel that heartbeat really, really fast. When you are triggered from feedback, you can feel it. But many of us don't do the work to figure out, really, where did it come from? And sometimes it's rooted in what I would like to call fear. Maybe you're just simply afraid of what they're going to say. Perhaps it's rooted in trauma. because you've had a previous experience. Someone's giving you feedback before and it didn't go well, right? You remember how you felt the time someone told me you didn't meet their expectation, and that's hard to hear. Once you can unpack that and be honest with yourself, because let's be honest, sometimes we like to avoid the truth even when it's with ourselves. But once you can do that work and really figure out this is not even about the information someone just gave me, this is rooted deeper. And there's some historical work that I need to do on myself, on my thought patterns and my emotions, to be in a healthy place, to be able to hear this new person who's giving me information. And it's a lot of work. It is a lot of work, but I tell you, it is so worth it. So once you do that work, right, we said first start with the realization that, hey, feedback is just information. It has no power until I feel something about it, until I think a certain way about it. And then second, you want to investigate that, right? Investigate that feeling, try to better understand the source, where it come from, and why you're feeling that way. The third thing you want to do is change the narrative. You got to change the game. Because now that you have awareness, that knowledge is power, you have to do something. You have to switch that thought process, because it is not healthy to continue to sit in a space where you feel less than, inadequate, unworthy, less than valuable. Because here's the thing, you were uniquely and wonderfully made and created to do something powerful in this world. But if you're holding on to a thought that you're less than, that you're inadequate, you're never gonna get there. Trust me. I have so many examples in my life where someone said something to me and I made it mean way more than what it was even worth. I had somebody say to me, they actually didn't say it directly to me, but they said it. I was actually on the track team, and someone had said I had an injury, and someone had mentioned something to the effect of me being washed up. Oh, I heard that. And I made it mean so much. This person who meant nothing to me other than a colleague, and probably didn't mean for me to hear it either. When I heard it, I took that little piece of information that I heard and I made it mean everything. And I remember sitting there, stewing and getting angry on that bus ride because I couldn't believe that someone would say such a terrible thing about my potential. But the reality was, it really wasn't even that person. It was about me and how I internalized it. Because guess what? There was a little bit of truth in there. It actually triggered me because I did have an injury. I was doubting my abilities. And to hear somebody else say something that almost validated this horrible truth for me, it triggered me. Now, here's the thing. We all respond differently when we're triggered. What I did, I was quiet, reflective. I used it as a little motivation, came back, and I actually won that meet. I remember it very clearly. But I was angry and holding these emotions, these heavy emotions the whole time because I couldn't believe, right, that this statement was made. Now, this person to this day has no idea that this even happened. I never approached the person about it. But that's an example I wanted to share, just to be honest and vulnerable with you guys about how feedback plays in your life. I could have went out on that field and absolutely given up and just said, yeah, that person's right, and give them so much more power over my life than they deserved. But that's why feedback is so important to me, guys. I think we passively interact with one another. We hear these little side comments and we think they're just like made in fun or it's nonchalant. But the reality is we take that information home with us, right? I mean, how many of you guys remember feedback from maybe your undergrad, comments people made to you, as you were maybe even in high school getting ready for prom? I see some of my high school peeps on here. Mr. Carpenter. You probably have these very fond memories, right? And maybe not so fond memories because of comments that were made. And that's why it's important that we focus on having that asset mindset instead of deficit. If someone gives you a piece of information, you have a choice to either use that and say, you know what? I can take this and either use it as motivation or information that I can add to myself, or you can look at it and say, you know what, you're right. I'm not valuable, I'm not good, I'm not worthy. And we know where that path leads. So you have two choices. There's always a fork in the road, and anytime you're presented with information, you have a choice. So information, take it as it is. No, it doesn't get power until you believe it and think the powerful thoughts that drive your behavior. And then you want to investigate that feeling. I said you want to change the narrative, right? So when it comes to changing the narrative, it's important for you to think about, what are your current default settings? Like, what's your pattern? Do you have a pattern of thinking that you need to be aware of? Most of us don't know what our patterns are. Journaling is a really great activity for you to do. So if you find your body responding, you have that visceral reaction to feedback or the anticipation of it, take out a notebook. Journal down your thoughts. How are you feeling? What's running through your mind? Oftentimes our minds are racing, trying to put together a bigger picture of what's going on. Take some notes and actually just write it out. Don't constrain yourself. Free flow. And I will tell you, you will learn more about yourself in that moment than you could ever imagine. Writing down your thoughts freestyle allows you to step out of yourself and really look at it concretely. And then when you read back the narrative to yourself of what's on your mind, you start to see, wow, I have some what I call feedback baggage. Have you guys heard of that? Probably not yet, because my book launches in October, but I talk about feedback baggage. Comment in there. Any of you have feedback baggage? And what I call this is it's the baggage, it's the leftover feelings and the stuff and the mess and the emotions that we have related to previous experiences. I know I have feedback baggage. I've worked through a lot of it, but let me tell you, there are still things that I'm working through. And so it's hard to change the narrative when you're still holding on to those really tough situations. Now, here's the thing. This is all based on biology. So I want you to know, hey, you're not actually a bad person if you're holding on to some baggage. We all have baggage, and it's based on biology. So let me do a quick little highlight of how this works. So we already know that the brain is amazing. It's basically a huge computer, and it is storing information at all times. So it's scanning its environment. Every memory that you have, it captures that and it holds on to it. You have an emotional brain, which is where all your memories and your feelings are. You have your logical brain, which is where all of your rationalizing, organizing, problem solving is. And then of course you have your primitive brain that's basically focused on all of your autonomic functions and survival, right? So those three parts of your brain are working together. And when you have experiences, it triggers, especially if it's feedback and maybe emotionally charged feedback, it triggers all parts of your brain, right? So the primitive brain gets triggered if someone says, for example, I'll do something simple like, are you gonna wear that? A little comment like that can send somebody really quickly through three parts of their brain. The primitive brain kicks on, your autonomic functions go up because your heart rate is going faster than it thought it should because it feels like it may need to run, get out of the room, or get prepared to fight. You have your logical brain who's trying to look at the person and try to rationalize, like, well, why would they even say this? But then you have your emotional brain, which works extremely fast to really trigger like your memories and those feelings. Those feelings trigger a behavior, and it's either you're gonna fight, you're gonna flee, or you're gonna freeze. So if you are holding on to some baggage, it's all based on biology because you had a memory or an experience that was so impactful that it actually stored itself in your emotional brain. It's stored in your limbic system. And so anytime you see someone who may appear to be like that last person who gave you that tough bit of feedback, the body immediately remembers that. It's not easy to forget that, right? So that's why you have to do the work to understand, like, hey, what are my triggers? What am I feeling? Pay attention to your heart rate. Pay attention to your body movements. Are you moving a lot? Are you really, really nervous when you're getting feedback? That tells you your body's remembering something, it's sensing something, and you might have to pause to better understand what that is so that you can feel as though you're in control. So we got to change the narrative though. So how do you do this? It's not easy, and it's not as simple as this may sound. So let me share. Some people think like, you know that Lego song, everything is awesome. Like, that's not what I'm preaching here, guys. I'm not preaching that everything's gonna be perfect and it's easy. Just think positive thoughts and you'll be a completely different person. So untrue. But I do think if you can find a little truth in a new thought that causes you less stress, you will be in a better place. So for example, if you say like, I can never do that. Well, that's a deficit mindset, thinking about what you don't have. But if you switch it to something like, I think I could figure that out with a little practice, that's a little different, right? It changes your energy. So the same thing when someone's delivering you feedback, right? And someone leans into you and says, hey, can I give you feedback? Don't hold your breath and go, oh no, here it comes, because that's what a lot of us do. You got to lean in and go, I'm curious. Yeah, tell me more. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Now, it's not that easy. Again, you have to figure out a thought that you can replace in your mind when you think about going into some of these conversations. The best way to do that, to change the narrative, is to look for evidence. You're a smart person. The brain, I told you, is a huge computer. So it has all of your memories and examples and proof for you, proof that you can take feedback. So think about it. Have you ever received feedback that was helpful? We oftentimes forget about those. Sometimes we focus just on all the times it was bad. I think same thing in relationships. We can highlight all the things that are wrong, but sometimes we forget all the amazing things that went well. And that's also a part of biology. The brain is actually designed to figure out what doesn't fit, what doesn't match, so that it can quickly get you to safety. So it's actually a safety mechanism that's built into your brain to make you focus on, hey, what's wrong, what might be harmful. And that's why you have to reclaim your power. That's why you have to be very, very conscious of your thought process so that you can tell your brain, like, slow down. I know you think this person might harm me with their feedback, but it's just information. It's not powerful until I give it the power. And if you can switch that narrative, you'll find yourself in a much more, not an easier, because I'll tell you, I still take a deep breath when it's time for feedback and kind of center my mind and breathe to make sure that I'm in the right mental space to receive feedback. But you'll definitely be in a much better place than where you would be if you just simply held your breath, held onto your chair and said, give me the feedback. Because if you think about it, I've actually seen this happen before where people go into it with a deficit mindset and they actually get nothing out of it. Because while this person is trying to give them constructive feedback on what they can do better, they're sitting there talking to themselves the whole time saying, oh my God, get me out of here, hurry up, oh my God, I wish this was over. And so you actually miss the beauty of the gift of feedback because you're trying to get yourself out of the room. So that's why I love feedback mentality, because I believe that if you are to master your mind, you can master your fate. Everything begins and ends with your mind, and what you feed your mind, it feeds your mentality. And so every day on my Instagram, I try to feed positive thoughts to kind of help frame my own thinking, because I'll be honest, a lot of this is for me and not necessarily for others. But I hope that it helps you as you try to shift your narrative from deficit mindset to asset mindset. Now, here's the thing. Someone asked me, well, can my mindset shift? Can it be different? Can I have an asset mindset and then one day switch into a deficit mindset? Absolutely. Mindsets aren't fixed. That's the beauty of it and kind of the challenge of it all as well. You can be perfectly in a great space and then in the next day have the insecurities creep in. Have you ever heard of imposter syndrome? I don't know if you've heard about it, but I'm pretty familiar with imposter syndrome. It's this belief that you are only here by accident, not necessarily by your gifts and your talents, that someone is going to figure out that you are not skilled at something, which is totally false. You are not an imposter. You are good at whatever it is that you are pursuing. And yes, can we all get better? Absolutely. But that's the journey, right? So I hope that makes sense to you guys as we're talking through this. The last bit of advice I'm going to give you guys before I let you enjoy your evening is an acronym that I came up with that you'll find in my book, Feedback Mentality, Unlocking and Unleashing Your Potential. Pre-sales will begin here in the next few weeks, and I'll have my book launch in October. So I wanted to give you a little teaser of an acronym that I use that really helps with what I call processing feedback. Processing feedback is all about what you do with feedback after someone delivers it to you. So once they give you the feedback and you say, thank you for your feedback, and they leave, processing feedback is all about what you say to yourself when they are gone and you're just left with their thoughts. And so for me, there's 4 things that you can keep in mind when processing feedback. And the acronym is easy. It's called love. So you have to love yourself. And I know it sounds cheesy, but RuPaul says it. You got to love yourself. If you don't love yourself, how in the hell are you going to love anybody else? So I love this acronym that I came up with. So the first is you got to let it go. So L is let it go. Check your baggage at the door. Do that individual work on yourself to uncover, hey, where am I stuck? Where are the triggers? And what are the things that are holding me down and holding me back? Oftentimes, you probably have thoughts from when you were 15 years old. You got to let it go. You got to do that work. Only you can do it. I'll do another talk on how to work through that baggage. The second thing, so you have to let go, and then you need to override. Like I said, you need to override and put a new memory there, a positive memory. You got to put something in there to replace it. Like I said, mindsets are not fixed. They are actually very dynamic and they can be developed. So take advantage of that. Override that thought, replace it with a new one and a healthy one, and create those new synapses in the brain. And your body, the mind body is connected. Whatever you think, your body will follow. So make sure you override it. The V is for visualize success. So you have to be able to see yourself being successful, actually living positively with that feedback and engaging in those conversations in a positive way. There's a lot of research around the power of visualizations. That's why dream boards are so powerful. But even on my track team in college, I know we did a little sports psychology, some imagery where we laid down and had to imagine the perfect long jump, the perfect race. You can do that too. And here's the thing, the brain cannot tell the difference between reality and perception. So as long as you perceive it in your mind, your body believes that it has done it already. So you have to visualize yourself having a positive, healthy relationship with feedback so that you can master it. And the last thing, so we have love, right? So let go, override, visualize success. The E is find the evidence, right? Take some time to celebrate yourself and prove to yourself that you're getting better, that you're figuring it out, and that feedback is helpful and healthy for you. So that concludes my live, guys. I'm going to hang on and see if there are any questions or comments or thoughts on the chat. But this was my first Feedback Friday, guys. Let me know what you think, how it went for you. If you want to talk about any different topics, I'd love to have your suggestions here. So feel free to put them in the comment box. If not, have a good night, and thanks for joining me. I hope you found this helpful. Thank you.